Only life skills.
Christopher, I'm finding the casino. All right, Senator Hayashi here. Senator Rodriguez. Senator Newlander. Senator Obian. Here. Senator Max Robbins.
Talking for the last time ever. Here.
Senator Roy. Here. Senator Ward.
Here.
Senator Abascara.
Here.
Senator Sellinger.
Here.
Senator Soni.
Here.
Senator Stillwell.
Here.
Senator Morrow. Senator Jacob Robbins. Senator Magnus. All right. Delegate Marino.
Here.
Delegate Heath. And Delegate Shang. Okay, quorum's met. All right, moving to the adoption of the agenda. Any changes to the agenda, Bobby?
Yeah, just as a general note on all of the items, I would suggest, like I did last week, that the new senators elect get speaking rights, and maybe that they do so for the reports for the officers, in case they have any questions for the people who present.
Yeah, that's only during new business.
Is that in the rules somewhere?
Yes. Max?
I don't know if I do this in adopting the agenda, but I have a feeling that it'll be added.
Yeah, you can add it now.
I can enter it now. Did you,
Tell me where.
the new business?
Okay. Prior new business.
Okay, wait. New business, yeah.
As A? Okay. And what's your bill?
Names in progress? We'll call it Max Dawson.
All right, so bill 1819-013
Why did you send me a PDF?
as A.
Wait, what is this?
There were documents.
This is a PDF.
No, it's a Word document.
Yeah.
This is a PDF, that's
All right,
it.
any other changes to the agenda, Jeremy?
I also have a bill. If you put it as C,
Okay.
thank
So
you.
bill 1819-013 is A.
Wait, Jim,
Yes,
if you don't mind, could you put it before the executive branch?
I do mind.
Gavel back.
Wait, okay, so Bill 1819.
013, and then C will be bill 1819-014. Oh, and then remove bill 1819-012 from new business, or from old business. Yeah. Okay, any other changes to the agenda, Bobby?
I have a question for Max about this item, and my question is this a waste of time?
That's subjective. No.
All right, any other changes, Curtis?
Just because I have to go to a quick meeting, I would like to move my referendum to the end after the election of a member to special committee on finance.
Your 1819-005?
Yes.
Oh, but it's.
Wait, that's old
On the
business.
executive branch, on the 006.
Okay,
Yeah, the executive
Perfect, thank you.
okay, any other changes? All right, seeing no other changes, agenda will be adopted as such. Okay, moving to the adoption of the minutes. Any changes to the 22nd meeting minutes? All right, seeing no changes, they'll be adopted. All right, now moving to public comment. Any member of the public wishing to speak at this time? All right, seeing no public, we'll move to reports from the officers. First to chair.
Thank you for not calling me Chairman. Hello, everybody. I have one thing to report on. I don't really have anything. I think the question at the end, but I am stepping down from J board chair. Wait till my questioning period.
All right, let this chair finish.
Yes, I apologize a little bit. I realize that this is an inopportune time because we have a new Senate coming in next year. But I have personal things. I got some medical challenges I need to focus on at the moment. I submitted my letter to Sean and Angela. It will be effective once Sean hits the gavel and adjourns this meeting. So after that, I'll still be around to bother you today. But after that, I will lose speaking privileges. I will not be holding hearings. I won't be doing any of that. You're welcome to still ask me every document question. It's just not going to take finding. It never was. Alex is going to be acting chair at the moment this meeting ends. He is really looking forward to that. After this report, if anyone wants to apply for it, Sean and Angela are going to be taking applications. I'll be helping them interview people, and I'm not going to recommend somebody to them. I will just help them interview and kind of tell the person applying what the job would entail. Yeah, I think that's it. All the other gym members are staying. Chase is staying as inspector. Wait. I think that's it. Yeah. Questions?
All right, questions for the chair, Max?
I just want, this is a formative question. Brian has been my only J board chair during my time at university, but the best J board chair I've ever seen. Wow. Just one big round of applause for Brian went to the library. I think he and I always talk to Brian. Great conversation, fantastic guy, and I can't believe I'm gonna know him beyond his capacity, but I'm Brian.
I work every night in the library between 6 and
The question is,
What?
can we still be friends?
That is pending what
Yeah.
you're, that is, Max, that's pending what your bill is.
All right, any other questions for the chair?
No, I don't get a row. I don't get a title. I'm not chair foo after today. Right? So again, you guys are, so I want to clarify this. You guys are welcome to Facebook message me, text me, however you communicate with me, asking me questions about student government. I still have all the government documents memorized, which is only a little bit of an exaggeration. So you guys are so welcome to ask me things. Once, I would recommend you go to Martina and Alex first, and then probably stop there. Once a new permanent chair is confirmed, I won't be talking SG shop anymore. It would undermine their leadership and their authority. So I would, if you do ask me, I would just go ask Chair XYZ, whatever.
Yeah. All right, any other questions for the chair? All right, seeing no other questions, thank you so much. All right, now moving to Comptroller Zitzman for his report.
Right, I got PowerPoint.
Yep, I'm on it. If I find the folder. I don't think I'll recognize. I never recognize the Prezi. I'm sorry. I hate this.
It's time for our monthly budget thing. Excellent. I'm glad. Yeah, here we are. Normally this would be earlier in the month since this is all information that is accurate up until the end of October. And nothing in here is reflective of what has happened in November. But okay, we're about 2.5 weeks in, so it'll be fine. First slide, let's see, I think is an overview of the budget. Yep, there it is. So that is, I'm glad you like it. That's the budget. Mostly the programming boards and a little bit of other things as well. That was adopted by the Senate in April or May. I forgot which, but that's that. So yeah, that's the same as it always has been. The second slide is just big numbers of how much has been spent and how much remains unspent. Again, this is as of October 31st, and this does not include spending that was in the process of being spent then, or is in the process of being spent now. It's just things, spending that has been completed by the end of October. So it's about $72,000. And in October, it was about $23,000. And altogether, that leaves just under $500,000 remaining for November, December, and the spring semester. Yep. Next is spending by account. Okay, so yellow is everything that's been unspent, and then the blue colors are things that have been spent, and within the blue colors, the light blue is spending that's in October. So the big areas of spending have been KPU, which spent barely anything in October, and Women's Initiative that spent most of its spending so far this year in October, and then there's been a little bit from the other accounts, but not very much to speak of. You won't see DOPAR on here because it was messing with the graph, because DOPAR has spent relative to its initial budget a negative amount of money this year because it got $1,000 extra from the Senate. So it spent just under $1,000, and then it got a $1,000 transfer to it. So it's standing right now, total balance at about $3,041. And then on the next slide, to make this a little bit more helpful, we have percentages. The last slide was just absolute numbers. This is every account's percent. So since we're about halfway through the year, we can look capital maintenance, co-sponsorship fund, the two accounts that I manage independently are just about half. Women's Initiative is coming up on half too. And then the other accounts are still, they have most of their budget remaining, so that you can expect that all to be spent in the spring. The goal is that we get as close to 100% as possible, still being less than 100%, because since this money is coming from students for their own benefit, we don't want anything to be left over when the students leave. So yeah, that's the state of all the accounts. What do we have next? Spending by account. Okay. So yeah, this is on the first graph here is for the whole year, which accounts have been responsible for what part of our spending. As you can see, it's mostly KPU and Women's Initiative, and then a little bit from the other ones. And within October specifically, you can see that Women's Initiative really accelerated their spending in the past month. About half of the spending in October was by Women's Initiative, and that is why it takes up such a large share of the pie overall. All right, let's see what's next. So KPU spending by category. Yeah, I've got, since the programming boards are almost the entire budget, we can go through and look at what they're spending money on and what the impact of that spending has been. So in KPU, it's about half speaking fees. Obviously, those are the biggest expenses. It's very expensive to hire speakers. So about 44% of their budget has been on speaking fees. And then production is the things that you need to spend to physically put on the event. So electricians for lighting, chairs, if you need somebody to set out chairs in some space, all those kinds of expenses, that's also expensive. Sometimes AU does it, sometimes the programming boards hire professionals to do it, but that is also expensive. And then we have a few other accounts: merchandise, venues, catering, and then other is just all manner of things. None of the expenses in other are very expensive. There's just a lot of them. So that's KPU's spending so far up through October. And then next we have some numbers about KPU. So KPU has had a lot of people go to their events so far this year relative to the other programming boards, 1,819. And then if we take that and apply that to their spending, this is what we get. So if you take all of KPU's spending, I don't remember exactly what it is, but if you take everything they've spent and divide it by 1,819, that gives you $23.18 per attendee. And I think in general, all of these are about spending per attendee, and I think that is a really valuable metric to determine how impactful our spending is, because I feel like it's kind of intuitive. Then KPU event spending per attendee is only the spending that KPU has spent on events. So there's some spending that KPU does that isn't for any particular event, like if they buy supplies for their office, that's not for an event. But if you see, most of what they've spent is on events. So that's why the number for event spending per attendee is practically the same as total spending per attendee. And then if you look at all the events, and you look at spending that has happened on that event, like KPU brought Condoleezza Rice earlier this semester, and if you look at the Condoleezza Rice event, this was spent. The average of events, if you look at event spending divided by attendees for that event, the average event was $52.49 per attendee to that event. Now that is only looking at events that had any associated costs with them. 3 events that KPU has had so far didn't cost KPU anything, so those are not included in this number. And then the most expensive event that KPU put on this year cost about $185 per attendee, and the least expensive event are the 3 that had no associated costs, and those cost $0 per attendee. So yeah, that's all this. This is in, and all this information in this slideshow are in the report that I put out every month. I didn't bring that with me today, but once the new website is up, coming soon, by the way, really soon, these reports will be online, so you can find them there. And Mulan, I saw you taking a picture of this. You, the executives, the programming directors, and the Senate Finance Chair all have access to my internal budget spreadsheet, and there the stuff is live, and you can also look at the breakdown of events if you find that useful. Yeah, next slide. I think we have WI. Excellent. So WI, really overwhelming. Their budget is speaking fees, and then for sponsorships, they gave KPU $2,000 to put on one of their events. I forgot which one. I think it was Dreamhampton. Yeah, and then some catering and other. So yeah, it's almost entirely speaking fees for WI. And then on the next page, we can evaluate their impact. So WI has almost 300 people come to their events. Their total spending, so if you take all of their spending divided by the number of attendees, theirs is $54. For KPU is about 23. Spending, so event spending, remember the difference between event spending and total spending for WI is $46 per attendee. And then a lower number where we come down is the average cost of WI event per attendee. And this is much lower than these other figures up here because WI has put on several events where they have a good number of people come, but they barely spend anything at all, just like $100 for catering or, some posters or something. So even though these numbers are higher, overall, if you look at it in aggregate, there have been several events that were much less expensive for WI, and that brings their average event cost down. And they, just like KPU, have had 3 events with 0 associated costs. And then the most expensive event for WINS initiative was $128.44 per attendee. And then we have sub next. And I should note for sub that this information is not very indicative of anything because they've only spent about 2% of their budget. So just take that for what you will. But their category breakdown looks a lot like Women's Initiative, where it's almost entirely speaking fees. And then we have other parts for production and catering. Again, only 2% of their overall budget. And then next we have, so sub, again, they haven't done much this semester, but what they have done, 70 people have attended. And their, like the cost of their events is right in the middle of KPU's on the lower end and Women's Initiative on the upper end, where they're spending about $42.67 total spending and event spending for attendee, because up through October 31st, everything that sub had spent was directly on events. So those two numbers are the same. I've already explained what this is, so I won't go through it a third time. And I think sub has had 3 events and all of them had associated costs. But yeah, that's that. On the next slide, just summing that all up together, this is what the programming boards have spent. This is their attendance. It's pretty similar. It's kind of intuitive that the more you spend, the more events you have, the more people come. That kind of makes sense. And then on the next slide, just the previous information I had on all the programming board slides here is up together for comparison. So there's no super strong patterns that you can glean from this, but in case you wanted to look at them in comparison, there it is. I think that's it for the programming boards. Then we come to co-sponsorships next. So up through October, we had spent money from our co-sponsorship fund on 10, 10 or 11 co-sponsorship events for club travel or events. There they are. In case you're interested in them, this is also in the document that will be up on the website, and it's on our public budget spreadsheet every time we co-sponsor a club event. If you want to reference it, there it is. Hopefully that's enough time for anyone who's interested to have looked over this slide, so we'll go next. Also on co-sponsorships, the demand has been higher than I anticipated that it would be. This year, our co-sponsorship fund is $8,000, which it's the first time we've had a fund specifically dedicated to co-sponsorships in our budget. And it has, $8,000 was higher than the previous amounts of money that had been spent on co-sponsorships that had come from other accounts like SG General and Capital Maintenance. But still, nonetheless, even though we have more money allocated for it this year, we're also seeing much higher demand. So because of that, as of now, we've spent close to $4,400 on co-sponsorships, and we have obligated an extra $500 for something next semester. So about $4,900 obligated of the $8,000 we have. Now, obviously, that's just over half. So if we keep up with that level of demand, we're just going to go right through the fund at the end of the year, and it's going to be pretty close to 100%. But if that demand accelerates, if more clubs want co-sponsorships in the spring semester than they did in the fall semester, that either means that I have to get in the habit of saying no. I haven't really had to say no for club co-sponsorships this semester, just a couple, and that was they were all not very good requests. But in general, if you're just having some event or traveling, we've been able to tell everybody, yes, we'll fund you, and get pretty close to the amount of money that they want. But if there's more demand in the spring, we won't be able to do that is one scenario, or the Senate could give a little bit more funding from somewhere else in the budget to the club co-sponsorship fund. And obviously that depends on if there's any money available somewhere else in the budget. But that's just something to put on your radar, that either we will have to slow down on club co-sponsorships, or there will have to be a supplemental reallocation. And then on the next slide, so at the beginning of the year, we set out a goal of the co-sponsorship fund is $8,000 to spend at least $2,000 of it on co-sponsorships for multicultural and affinity groups, and that was based on the proportion of student organizations that are multicultural or affinity groups. It's just under a quarter, so we thought, a full quarter of the budget of the account, $2,000 would be good. And we've already met that and surpassed it in the fall semester with almost $2,400. And yeah, that's because of the requests that we've had. A lot of them have been from multicultural and affinity groups. They're very active in programming and doing events, and they have availed themselves of our resources. So that's 2 thumbs up from me. Let's see, what's next? Is there another slide? Aha, yes. So now we come to the area of student government spending that I unfortunately don't have any records for you, and that's undergraduate councils. They don't have anything in our budget, but they are spending money and raising revenue this year. Specifically, the SIS Council is holding its international dinner, which is a yearly event. And when I saw this, it raised some questions for me. So Brian and Martina explained to me that the Constitution sets out a system where the councils manage their own finances and raise their own revenue, which I knew, like, if we were making the system from scratch, maybe that doesn't make sense, but that's how the system is set up. But independent of that, where they manage their own finances, as comptroller, I'm also assigned the responsibility of keeping records of all student government financial activity for transparency and internal accountability and all sorts of other purposes. But I don't have any records of undergraduate council funding. I've been in a little bit of contact with the treasurer of the SIS Council, but I'm having a hard time getting to them. And also they, at least from what I gather, aren't really in the groove of being in student government. So it's kind of a strange request for me coming from what they see as an outside group, student government, which really they're actually a part of, asking for their financial records. So that's something, another thing to put on the Senate's radar, that I think it would be useful if we're doing financial transparency, not to have some parts of our organization that are just cut off from that. So yeah, that's something for your consideration as well. I think that's the last thing I have on the budget. Next slide, I think, is about the Board of Trustees. Yep, the Board of Trustees met this week. As comptroller, I was on the audit committee and the finance and investment committee, which met on Thursday for about 3 hours overall. Nothing earth-shattering there, but it was interesting. And I can't really go into a whole lot of detail about what the board talked about because of all sorts of confidentiality reasons. But I can tell you in general, I am confident that the financial state of the university is going in the right direction. Everything seems pretty good. I'm glad that's entertaining. And then lastly, on the last slide, some updates about the Student Involvement Fund. This is still an ongoing process, and if I had a magic wand, I think we would be moving faster, but we have to deal with the situation at hand. So the status of that is that the Center for Student Involvement has collected these applications, and we, the members, the governance groups of AU, us, student government, AUCC, and the media board are waiting for CSI to convene the Budget Advisory Committee, which is a committee of those 3 groups that will meet and review these applications. We've been waiting on that since the application period closed. Perhaps it'll happen soon, perhaps it won't, but I'm crossing my fingers. On Wednesday, Mulan organized a student leadership roundtable where the leadership of those organizations and RHA got together and discussed collaboration between our organizations. And just kind of an impromptu thing, since there were a lot of members of the Budget Advisory Committee there, I think 5 out of 9 members were there representing all 3 groups. We discussed the progress of the Budget Advisory Committee at that quasi-back meeting. And we came to the conclusion that, we want this to be done at a swifter pace. And we kind of settled out some things about how we want the review process to go once we do it, because it's a new review process. It's never been done, and there's not really a framework laid out. I sent an email to all the back members with some proposals for how our meeting should go on Thursday. I'm still waiting to hear back from them, but hopefully either CSI calls this meeting or the other back members, we can discuss how the meeting would go. But hopefully there's some progress on this soon, because it has drawn on for quite some time, and we're getting to the end of the semester. Also, the back members, we all want a better timeline for the spring because CSI wants to do this again in the spring. And, you know, I don't think that this pace that we've been going at is satisfactory. But that's that. I think that's the last slide. So then we have questions on the next slide. Can you move one more slide? Thank you. Also, just FYI, at ausg.org/budget, of course, there's more information about our budget, and I'm expanding the public budget spreadsheet to include expenditures from previous years as much as I have records for. The records are incomplete, unfortunately, but that's on the way. And also on that spreadsheet are historical budgets for the past like 8 or 9 academic years. You can look at student government budgets to see what they have them. And that's all complete according to the records that I have. So does anyone have any questions?
Questions for the comptroller? Max?
As far as budget presentations go, that was fantastic. So good job. If you could tell me, if you can answer any question, if I had a question, what would it be?
I'm confused. Sorry.
All right, any other questions, Adam?
So at least for the first 2 councils, since they had like a lot more events than whatever the third one was. Looking at the data, did it seem that the most expensive events per attendee were so much more expensive than the average because they had operations expenses that were much higher than the other events, or that they had just planned for sort of the average amount of people to show up, and it turned out that attendance was lower, so that's what brought up the average.
Yes, to clarify, I think you're talking about sub and women's initiative. So on sub, I would say that, like I said at the beginning, I don't think subs numbers right now are indicative of very much of anything because
KPU
we're
and
talking.
and WI.
Okay, so on KPU, their spending per attendee is pretty low compared to last year, compared to the other programming boards, just in general. They're putting on some pretty cost-effective events, just period. So I think like the premise of the question doesn't exactly fit to KPU. For WI, I think their numbers are kind of skewed right now. We'll have to see how they develop as the spring semester goes and more events happen, because they haven't done a lot of events that have seen a lot of spending. So the ones that they have might skew the numbers. Because like I said, a lot of KP or WI events so far have been like one things where there are basically no associated costs. So in general, I would say the programming boards, their events have been pretty cost effective, and anything that might reflect a higher number in the data right now will be smoothed out as the year goes on.
Yeah, I mean, I just asked that because the average does indicate that they're being, that they're spending efficiently on most of their events. I'm just wondering if for the most expensive event, the one that is for KPU and the one that was for WI, does that reflect more like students not coming, like less to the event relative to other ones, or where it was spending for that event just much higher than the others? Or does neither variable indicate why why it was just so much more expensive?
Before I get into that, do you want to add something?
Yeah, I can take that. I don't really understand what the question is being asked, but I kind of get a general overview of the foundation. When we look at musicians, they have more money this year, $40,000 in percentage finance than I gave them compared to last year. Last year they had around $22,000 annually for their budget. So when we're looking at why there might be maybe a discrepancy of like for musicians, it looks like there's more money cost per attendee. I think that they've done more events within the cost of like a semester that like has been spending money than it has been. Usually musicians tends to use their money, the $20,000 that they would have in the spring, which would take that night, Women's History Month, a lot of different events like that. So I think Sarah, because she has $40,000 more than she had last year, caused her to, okay, now that I have this money, I can actually bring speakers like Dream Hampton, like Congresswoman Adams, because I now have the money to be able to pay for those people, like Dominique Jackson as well, where previous years would have to be like one submission partnering with KPU and have to take more of the budget that they had.
Yeah, and
So,
I think
yeah.
If I understand your question correctly, you're asking for the specific events for sub or
Yeah,
for
I'm
KPU
asking
and Women's
one event.
Initiative, like the the most expensive events for those, why are they so expensive for attendee? And I don't think it's conclusively one way, like either attendance was low or costs were high. I try and remember what those events were, and if I remember correctly, it was kind of a mix of both. Some events just are expensive, that's how it is, and sometimes a lot of people don't show up. But if I can't share a lot of that information for the specific costs of these events, but if the finance committee is interested in looking at attendance records and costs to look at, what is the driver of some events cost per attendee, that is something that they can reach out to me about.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions for the comptroller, Jim?
Bob, you talked about how the SIS council won't forget anything. So they don't get income from us at all. I was just confused about how.
Yes.
Fundraisers.
No, they're funded for that event by the School of International Service, and they're also charging students who go to it $7 for attendance, which, if I were in charge of them, I would not have them be doing, but they're their own independent thing, and I guess they can do whatever they want. But what I would like to see from the Senate is some method where their financial records can be lumped in with everyone else's financial records for the same purpose why we present any of the records at all.
So one other thing you mentioned was the co-sponsorship plan. What I'm just wondering is what the thought process was behind funding clubs, and whether or not that sort of indicates that the AUCC is underfunded or not providing enough funds to clubs.
Yeah, that is a good question because, I advocated last year for this fund to be increased from previous years. But at the same time, I have to think, how are we different from AUCC? Because they're their own thing. They have much more money for clubs than we do, and we don't want to supplant them and make them kind of like obsolete. So in general, and I told this, CSI held 3 training sessions for club leaders at the beginning of this year, and I went to those and presented on student government's resources, and I told them that we're not, like AUCC is still the primary source for club funding, but when you're coming to student government, that's for like special events, I call them. You're putting on some programming on campus, you're traveling, and perhaps, AUCC couldn't fund your whole amount because they have budget shortfalls or they have some restricted policy that student government doesn't have, or what have you. So the difference is that student government is doing co-sponsorships, not just regular funding of events and travel. So yeah, that's the headline, and that's how it has been for several years. We've done club co-sponsorships for as long as I have records for. So yeah, that's that. And I have some internal guidelines for me and the one other person in my cabinet who look at co-sponsorship applications, and we have some principles of who we give money to and who we don't, to differentiate ourselves from AUCC, who just gives money to clubs in general.
Okay.
Any further questions for the comptroller? All right. Yes.
One last thing, I was just wondering, so for councils for any council under AUSG's purview, specific to the SIS council, their case that we were just talking about earlier, because they're allowed to take care of financing as they please, relevant to the rules that AUSG and its group organizations have to follow, are they allowed to charge? Is any council allowed to charge for an event?
Yeah, so student government doesn't have any internal rules about charging for events. Now, the university does in administering the student activity fee, which is where we get our budget from. They say the university spends all student activity fee money, so they get to determine which policies constricted spending, and they allow student government to tell them what they would like the university to spend it on. So in their prerogative in managing student activity fee money, the university says that no student activity fee money can be used to fund events that have admission unless all of the money raised from admission fees are donated to charity. But the SIS Council for this event is not funding it through the student activity fee. They're funding it through tuition revenue that is owned by the School of International Service. SIS is funding this dinner. And so far as I know, obviously, since this event is happening, there is not that same restriction on school revenue as there is on student activity fee revenue.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the comptroller? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Alright, and for my report, CRP favorably recommended Grace Kristen to be senator for the campus at large. So you will be hearing her nomination later today. Any questions for me about this report or anything else related to the speaker? Alright, seeing none. Moving to new business, first to the parliamentarian for her ruling.
Okay, so I'm going to rule, Bill 1819-013, out of order.
Can, you
Right.
parliamentary inquiry right here. I have spent a lot of time looking at this bill. In fact, my own plan that I wrote myself. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 sponsors, which, knowing our small body, is a sizable portion of this body, and co-sponsors and sign off of this bill. So for not even to be considered is travesty,
Do you have
given
a
the,
question?
Yeah.
You said a parliamentary.
I'm throwing a parliamentary declaration. This is a matter of
Alright,
state
that's
security.
out of order. The parliamentarian's ruling has been made, and the bill will be removed from the agenda.
Motion made to overturn the parliamentary.
No.
CRP can overrule the parliamentarian.
Alright,
I have a motion.
Can I dissolve in
alright, we're in new business. Yes, your motion?
My first motion is I would like to motion for the senator-elect to have speaking rights.
Alright, is there a second on the motion? Alright, is there a discussion on the motion? Alright, seeing no discussion on the motion, we'll move to vote. All those in favor of granting the senators-elect speaking rights, say yay.
Yay.
All opposed, say nay. Alright, the ayes have it. The senators-elect now have their speaking rights.
I have one more
Yes.
motion. I would also like to motion for Sarah, considering she's on the elections commission, to have speaking rights in regards to the bill, that one. Because Iman
Okay.
was here, he had a whole thing about that, and he's not here, and Sarah's,
Is there a second on the motion? Okay, is there a discussion on the motion? Alright, seeing no discussion, we'll move to vote. All those in favor of granting Sarah speaking rights relevant to referendum 1819-006, say yay.
Yay.
All opposed, say nay. Alright, the ayes have it. She will be granted speaking rights specific to referendum 1819-006. Alright, moving into new business, first to the confirmation of Grace Kristen to be senator for the campus at large. What was yours?
Hi everyone, just want to thank Sean and everyone for being here. Before I get started, I am from the suburbs of Chicago, so I do have somewhat of an accent. And I say Costco, Dad, weird, like honestly, I don't hear it. It's just my friends, and they talk weird because I'm Boston. And then, so I was raised in suburbs of Chicago, and my friends always crack up, and there's the mafia for all over Chicago. And I always tell them, like, oh, my great uncle was actually invited and heard this experience with home, so it's actually really ironic. Yes, my mom grew up on the south side of Chicago, so she was always like aware and experienced like sense of gun violence and gun violence in her community. So that and I still have a family here, friends like we did down there. So I always became like one of my issues I was cared about was gun violence. So I actually joined March for Our Alliance DC as a treasurer over the summer. I worked with them to kind of educate and spread awareness to communities to try to prevent all these senseless acts of violence. Another thing, I said I grew up with Catholic. I always struggled with that. The Catholic Church is kind of like rigid on women's rights and just kind of against contraceptives and stuff. So I would like to try to, like, as I work in the Senate, I would try to like partner with the Women's Initiative and the Health Center to try to like provide more like feminine products and more feminine products like along with the condoms and stuff like in dorms to try to like expand access to women's rights and products. And then another thing, in addition to that, I would like to work with the Health Center in Saragoff, which is a new registered dietitian, to open sharing more of the mental health services now that we have on campus. I know personally I work with my good friend on campus, struggled with eating disorder in high school. When she went through a counseling center, she was actually having special needs like that. She was forced to go off campus to find her counseling, so I really like to change that notion. Yeah, so I know like all you guys, I just want to make America a better place, more people.
Thank you. Questions for the nominee? Any questions? Adam?
Are you assuming a position in the Senate in the spring?
Yeah.
Oh, that would be up to the 15th Senate.
Oh, I meant like, was she in the election?
All right, any other questions for the nominee? No.
You talk a little bit like your involvement on campus.
Okay, so yeah, so I've been with AUSG just as like a member at large and stuff, and then March for Our Lives. In the DC chapter, we oversaw GW, Georgetown, and American, and then we just added Howard recently, which I had to resign at the end of the summer due to other things and stuff going on in my life at the time, but I'm still really involved with them. I've done I think the majority of us have I have experience on state Senate campaigns and when I worked on the Hill and stuff, so I definitely have that political experience at that time too.
All right, any other questions for the nominee? All right, any other questions? If you could please do the All right, discussion on the nominee. All right, seeing no discussion, we'll move straight to vote. All those in favor of confirming Grace to be senator for the campus at large for the remainder of the 14th Senate, say yay.
Yeah.
All opposed, say no. At the ayes, she's confirmed.
You gotta add Irv and
Alright, so you're confirmed, so you now have full speaking rights and voting rights. Senator Ward just sent me his bill, so I'm forwarding it to you now. In the meantime, don't go wild.
Oh, nope, that's the wrong bill. Ignore that. No.
Do you have a question?
oh, do I need to explain this real quick?
Oh, so your password's messed up. Yeah, he's aware.
Okay.
I will let him know that it's still.
You good there? I already got it.
Oh, no, I reformatted it, because I had to reformat.
I like to say, Face eater in a classroom, Kevin. His entire body is out of order.
Yeah, I don't know. Max, did you eat breakfast this morning? More often.
Okay.
Okay, so, you should have all received Bill 1819-013. Would the sponsor like to speak?
Sure, so I was talking to Sarah, and she let me know that her new elections commissioner has been talking about speaking rights as far as whether it's just for the elections commissioner or for members of the commission at large. Just for some fact that something comes up and one of them can't make it, so we already have speaking rights. So yeah, that's just stuff.
All right, questions for the sponsor?
I was actually gonna make a motion to make the amendment, but that's not at this time, so.
All right, any other questions, Katie?
Jeremy, would you be open to adding an amendment to include senators elected?
I was going to do that. Yes. Definitely.
questions? Adam?
Would you be open to adding an amendment to include any members of the public as well?
So public can speak during public comment, and I think that's for the sake of how the meeting can go, that maybe where public comment is already placed, if that's appropriate to leave it that way.
All right, any other questions for the sponsor? Kevin?
Would you be open to amending it to allow deputy directors to receive stipends to the student development fund? Would you ask me correct?
To clarify, I think he's meaning also, maybe some like proxies for directors, like, you know, that.
Oh, yeah,
Like,
sure.
like Chanel or someone,
Mhm.
that more like,
Yeah, that would
oh,
be,
God, no, like, you know.
that'd be totally fine, yeah. That would be totally fine.
Any other questions for the sponsor? All right, seeing no questions, we'll move straight into discussion. The floor is open for discussion on Bill 18-19-013.
Why don't you?
Jeremy?
I think I'm gonna
Sure.
wait first reading.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Okay. Is there a second on the motion? Okay, discussion on the motion? All right, seeing no discussion, we'll move to vote on the motion.
Right after all directors,
Okay, and what is the wording?
all directors and those who will be proxying for them. Is that right?
Wouldn't proxies have
That's
the same right?
Okay, which, is that the full motion?
No, it's not.
Okay, keep going.
Just say all.
And all deputy directors
Okay. Any, is that the full language?
of that specific one.
Okay. Is there a second on the amendment? Okay. Is there a discussion on the amendment?
Would be great.
Yes.
Does directors and deputy directors include those not within the Senate, but in the other branches of AUSG? Specifically referencing the,
Yeah, deputy directors and directors are only the executive.
Okay.
Any other question or any other points on the,
Yeah, my question, can you make the all deputies a different color? from
Oh, yeah.
members, because that's in the original motion?
Yeah,
Thank
sure.
you.
Yep.
any other points on the amendment? All right, seeing no other points, we move to vote on the amendment. All those in favor of the amendment to add proxies and deputy directors, as stated here, say yay.
Yay.
All opposed, say nay. All right, the ayes have it. Now included. All right, the floor is still open, Jeremy.
I'd like to make another amendment.
Okay.
After executives elect, could you also include senators elect?
Yeah, if I can type properly.
Is that, okay? Is there a second on the motion? All right, discussion. Seeing no discussion, we'll move straight to vote. All those in favor of the amendment to add senators elect to the bill, say yay.
Yay.
All opposed, say nay. All right, the ayes have it. It is now included. The floor is still open. Right.
I just have a question. About the chief of staff at all, the non-constitution is the chief of staff, right? As per the bylaws, but this is amending the bylaws is excluding chief of staff.
No.
You still have to.
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay, Bobby?
Just a little grammar thing. As highlighted in yellow now, it says members of the elections commission. So we should change that.
No, but struck through.
Oh,
Yeah.
There's a strike.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. That's fair enough.
Sorry. All right, any further discussion points, Adam?
I would like to motion to make an amendment.
All right, go ahead.
At the end of the Residence Hall Association, I'd like to include members of the public.
All right, is there a second on that motion? All right, is there a second on the motion to include public after Residence Hall Association? All right, seeing no second, the amendment failed. Okay. The floor is still open for any discussion or amendments.
I would just like to say for the record that although the previous amendment is not like, I don't know the technical term, that is, there is still places to talk during public comment, so that's not barring any member of the public from speaking during the meeting.
Thank you. Any other points? Bobby?
And I would say like the purpose of enumerating people who have speaking rights is to like recognize the fact that not everyone has speaking rights. Like that's the whole purpose of this enumeration. So.
All right, any other discussion points, Adam?
Well, since we're all talking about it, I thought I'd throw my point in. Simply, I just thought that if we were going, the purpose of extending speaking rights to these groups is similar to the purpose of extending speaking rights to the public. While certainly the leaders that we've extended speaking rights to as amendments to this item before us, I think that ultimately the purpose of extending speaking rights to students is most important because ultimately we want to welcome people into this chamber when we're meeting, and obviously people, members of the public, aren't particularly interested in coming. But in the situations in which they were to come, I think that it would be in the interest of, it'd be in their interest and in our interest to welcome them to share their opinion and ask questions, only because the way they can ask questions right now means that they can't ask questions related to speakers giving reports, visiting speakers, such like that. And so even though they are allowed to ask questions in their specific intermissions, they can't ask questions about certain matters.
All right, further discussion points, move on.
So I get it in theory, and I remember when you were a member of the public, where you're getting a public comment to end. And I think it can get a little bit confusing where you have so many people raising their hands to kind of figure out who they are and where they're from. Them asking questions that they might not understand, like the nitty-gritty, like parliamentary procedure and how things go. Because then you have them doing speaking rights that they might then start to public and well, can I motion? Can I also vote? It just blurs. I mean, public that's commenting for every single part of what happens in undergraduate senate when you do have those specific parts of it.
All right, any other discussion points, Jeremy?
As far as the amendments, those are designed, for instance, with the elections commission, all of them being able to, if the commissioner can't make it, you still have somebody from the commission who's able to talk. For instance, with directors, which is what was already there, adding the deputy directors, Kevin, for instance, can't be here, but wants to have something to say about it, something we're considering. So already have one of the deputies being able to talk just makes things smoother. And as far as senators elect, it makes their transition process so smoother too. When they are senators, they're already used to the flow of stuff.
Any other discussion points? Max, did you have discussion?
Yeah, I very much reiterate what Juan said. I think the idea of our body and our parliamentary procedure, even if it doesn't necessarily agree with my bill, is that is that the body's supposed to be kind of something that not everyone is trying at any point in time and of it. So that's what I just said.
Any other discussion points, Adam?
So recognizing those concerns, I just want to make a motion to make one last amendment. So at the same position at the end of Residence Hall Association, it would read, extend speaking rights to members of the public only for the use of, only to be used during the question and answer period at the conclusion of reports.
All right, is there a second on the motion to amend? All right, seeing no second, the amendment fails. Okay. Further discussion on the entirety of the bill. Okay, seeing no further discussion, we'll move straight to vote on the bill. All those in favor of approving Bill 1819-013 as amended, say yay.
Yay.
All opposed, say nay. Or the ayes have it, the bill approved. Okay, now moving to the election of a member of the Special Committee on Finance. The floor is open for nominations. Jeremy?
I nominate Kate.
All right. Is there a second on the nomination? Yeah, your question.
I'll let you know. Could you also just appoint the body who currently sits on the finance committee? Yeah.
We'll get to that now. All right, so the Finance Committee currently comprises of Jacob Robbins as chair, Wayne Rodriguez, Max Robbins, Anuria Viscara, Madison Mora, floor is open for nominations. There is the nomination of Katie Sullinger. Is there a second? Okay. The floor is still open for nominations. Okay, is there a second on that? All right, see no second. Then
Oh,
What is
All right.
it?
All right, the floor is still open for nominations. Any other
Did that-
nominations?
Did that pass or fail?
No, that failed. Because I
Okay.
didn't receive a second. Yes,
Right, there's a lot of.
yeah. Max, you're recognized. Okay, is there a second? All right. Yeah, you can second your own nomination.
No,
you can't.
you can't second your own motion.
Okay.
No, my motion.
My motion.
Oh, yeah, for nomination, okay, yeah.
Okay.
Point of order, Sean.
Yeah.
Shouldn't you be asking people whether they accept nominations?
Oh, yeah, do you accept? Do you accept?
Yes.
Okay. The floor is still open. Okay.
Point of inquiry.
Yes.
Just for the good of the body, do you anticipate that the finance committee will do one single more thing in this term?
That is up to the chair.
Another point of
Yes.
we only have one more meeting, correct?
They're scheduled to be two, but if the body does not want to have a meeting on the 8th, since that is finals weekend, I'm inclined to not have that meeting. So currently that would mean we're just scheduled to meet next week, which is the 24th. Yeah. Okay. Katie, since you were nominated first, the floor is yours to give a statement.
Well, first, thank you to Jeremy. I'm interested in being on the finance committee just because, there's a lot going on with the budget process that will be happening soon. And I'd like to be more familiar with that, into it. And already, I've noticed what's been going on over the last year since I've been in Senate. And I think the budget process is something really interesting that is a little bit of experience that I can go on. I'm really just kind of working with other organizations on campus to put together a budget that the common experience while also serving students. And I guess
Thank you. Questions for the nominee? All right, seeing no questions, moving to Rashida.
Hi everyone, my name's Matt Jordan. I'm a business major, so I kind of have like the finance perspective in me, but I know I was working with Wayne just on like talking about finances and like these different organizations.
All right, questions for the nominee? Okay, seeing no questions. You could both leave the room. All right, discussion on both nominees. Sorry, either of the nominees. Floor is open, wide open, completely open. All right, seeing no discussions, so get them.
I don't think I know. Just saying.
Do you need paper?
Nope, I got
Can we motion to,
yeah.
What is this?
I can see like, it's like, I think you went from like, right here, fine, kind of like. Go back up.
I got paid.
I'll remind it of it. You're saying.
Yeah, I know. I think you have a wealth of finance. Primarily for this one, we're buying division, do this time.
I'm still here.
Finance and finance. Then the same day.
No, thank you.
Walking by me, shop, everybody, right?
Oh,
So there, it's very important. Yeah.
Very few of us made it.
Alex, wait your hand. Wait, that's it. Were you originally elected rep? Do you know how to vote? Sorry. You can't vote, you're not a proxy. You might do it. That is a question.
Alex, I'll make your name. What? Okay, just harass me, right?
Alex, yes,
Stay here.
Sarah, she's vice chair.
Vice chair?
I'll be honest, I didn't realize
Sarah,
that, like,
Sarah.
Yes.
Raise
Okay.
frequency.
Just send me a list of names. Just send all the damn names, because I'm gonna forget in like 2 minutes. Yes.
I can make them if you just
No,
send me
it
the
takes,
file.
it takes like 2 seconds, don't worry about it. I have a file.
Okay.
I have a file somewhere buried in my like 5,000 documents. I support that fully.
Anyone else want a name tag on that?
Does anyone need a name tag besides Adit? Ryan,
Oh,
okay, Ryan, Adit, Alex, the rest of the J board.
No, don't get the rest of the board name tag.
Okay, then never mind.
We'll make it.
So Alex, Adit, Ryan. Ryan, what's your last name?
Pardo. I just messaged you, Pete, Sarah.
Thanks.
That's the real one. That's not my
I forgot
job.
I've been researching human
They're gonna
trafficking, and I
go
just
over the
opened my
road.
computer to all documents about slavery.
Alex, be impartial, because for saying you can't have an opinion. You know what it is?
You know that, Alex, we're in like Canada.
I can't take a position, but
Sean, hurry up. I can't even go home. I have work immediately after, and I'm like not here for it.
Did someone win?
Okay, we're gonna come back to order. All right, so by a vote of 5-4, Katie Sullinger is now on the finance committee, so congratulations. All right, now moving to the consideration of referendum 1819. Yeah.
That's what I just said.
Yeah.
How many do you have? Yeah, that's
Point of inquiry. Were there any abstentions or write-ins?
All right, now moving to the consideration of referendum 1819-006, a referendum to reform the AU student government executive branch. The sponsor's not here, so we're gonna move straight to discussion on the referendum. Yeah, so this isn't here.
Oh, I was like, no, my question was gonna be, there was someone else representing.
Okay.
I'll represent Curtis.
No.
All right, discussion on the whole referendum, yeah, right?
So I issued, for those of you who don't remember, I issued a judicial notice about an original form of this where it got rid of the vice president, comptroller, secretary, and replaced them with the vice president of programming, a vice president of finance, a vice president of communication. That notice said that if that one had gone through, that the current executives would have kicked out along with other cabinets. That was real messy. This current language would allow Luan, James, and Bobby to keep their jobs. I think, does this one still maintain the DEI one? Is there a DEI one?
Yeah, there's a DEI.
Yes. So is it still the special election thing? Yeah, so if this passes, a special election will get snapped within 30 days, and that's Elon's job for the director of DEI, DIE, whatever it is.
It would be next week. Yeah.
Okay, so discussion on the whole referendum, Luan.
So I remember, so this new one, Curtis has stopped me in MPC to talk about it. And as y'all remember last Senate meeting, I said I would not support this referendum because of all different like vice presidents of this, also because I would lose my job. Also subsequently all the programming directors would be fired and also the cabinets would be fired. And also Bobby and James's cabinets would also be, because everyone would be fired. So I told Curtis that in order for him to get my support, it would be this, because I don't think like changing the name title of something will change like the effect of what people will do in that role. But what I did appreciate that he did is that in this, it actually lays out what the different job descriptions are, which I think right now in the Constitution is very like generic. I think it says main comptroller support is like, you know, like oversee all student government finances. I think for the vice president it says like they have to do event program for student government, so it's very like vague. So I do appreciate that Curtis actually like detailed what exactly they should be doing. Where it's more kind of like a one row, it's like, okay, this is essentially what they'd be doing, and then you can set out from it. And I do appreciate that the DEI position would be a executive board position, and the money is already like there because we have two DEI directors. The only thing with this that I think is good to have a conversation about if it does pass and it does become a special election is oftentimes we see in a lot of clubs on this campus DEI positions, and it often is always given to a person of color. So I'm wondering for this position, like, will it look like that? How some clubs like will just give it to a black or brown person because they're like, oh, you're diverse, so do this DEI position. So I'm wondering if you have someone here on this campus that might be white passing, but still have those intersectionality of races, or if you have like a white gay male that is considered diverse, like how the voters will be like, well, they're running against a person of color, I'm going to vote for that person of color than over a white male, like white gay male, but like they still are considered under that spectrum. So not saying that I don't support the referendum, just think about how that might perceive when it comes down to voters voting.
All right.
Yeah, to go over that too, I think there's also another word and also the two go that kind of in the opposite sense that you have a majority white campus and looking for a DI position. I mean, I have seen it too many times, at least not only in this university, but other universities, where the DI chair or the person involved in charge of diversity and inclusion is just a white person, like cisgender white person like that. And that's another concern too. And are we really trying to make the DI position like a political, like elected position? Or are they like really kind of compared to a national government? Or are they basically kind of a bureaucrat who like knows policy and will get things done and is still elected and approved by the rest of the body of the Senate? So
Further discussion points, Adi?
Yeah, so you're talking about how there's two current of the directors. So what's the difference between their role and what this role would be?
The only difference is that this role, from what I can see, Curtis, it will be an executive board elected profession instead of it being appointed by the president. So, okay, that's what.
Yeah, sure.
So yeah, the other would be in the president's cabinet. These two would also be part of the board aligned, right?
Oh no, it would basically get rid of those two.
Oh, get rid of those two.
Well, for next school year, so it would be like instead of how Angela had two board directors, it would just be like a person that's elected by the student body, like a fifth executive board. Okay. Curtis is actually here. He can probably answer that question too.
All right. Brian?
So yeah, just to jump off that. Yeah, so currently Angela has 2 DEI directors. Those 2 persons would remain in her cabinet. And currently with the bylaws as they stand, if this passes and is ratified, there would be a separately elected executive position, but there would remain a DEI director in the president's cabinet as prescribed in the bylaws. So you would, I'm not saying what you have to do or should do with that, but currently, if this is ratified, there would be an elected DEI person and an appointed DEI person in the president's cabinet.
Only thing, given that the Constitution includes the executive board members, president, vice president, doesn't that mean that his bylaws superseding the Constitution?
So yes, it is, but because there's no contradiction between the two, that there just is an establishment of a director and there's an establishment of another director that do the same thing, then this one doesn't out unless the referendum.
Wouldn't there be a contradiction though? It says in the Constitution that the only elected executive board positions are A, B, C.
Yes, but because the president's DEI director is not elected, then it is an appointment that the president would be required to make. So the DEI director here, I guess it's DIE, the DI director. I will just point that out. I'm just going to keep on it. DEI director here and the DEI director here. The provisions are not conflicting. It's a redundancy issue. But because there's not 2 positions that are both elected to do the exact same thing, there's not a contradiction. It's just, again, it's a redundancy problem. But this doesn't nullify the bylaws provision.
All right, Curtis? So I need to leave this meeting. Feel free to do whatever you want of this piece of legislation. Just know I'm hurting right now. And don't call it the die. I hate acronyms. That's why I didn't use AUSG in this referendum. But, to address Ryan Bardo's point, he's making a good point about a contradiction. However, according to the text of this proposed constitutional amendment, it's adding an executive board position, one position for the Director of Diversity and Inclusive Excellence. And if you scroll up to section 1 of Article 2, it says that the president has the discretion to appoint directors to their respective cabinets. So Akanksha, I forwarded this referendum to Akanksha and Diamond to keep them in the loop. But like Brian said, if this referendum were to be passed in the spring by the student body, 2/3 plus 1 student, they would just add this new director position. Akanksha and Diamond can continue to do the great work. In the future, I guess not President Burwell, but President Chen, subsequent presidents can do whatever they want, not whatever they want. They can appoint positions to their cabinet. And with this new executive board position, it's a way for, the student government to say to the student body, hey, we got your back when it comes to creating a community at AU that is not only diverse, but inclusive. Unfortunately, I do have to leave this meeting, personal privilege, and for personal reasons. But whatever you decide to do with this referendum, I hope it is not to vote down this referendum, but if you really need to have another conversation next week, let's have a conversation next week. And I'll be holding office hours this week to address any concerns. Any concerns about the budget, finance, stipends, direct that to Bobby, Jacob Robbins, or no, is Jacob Robbins still chair? Jacob Robbins or anyone who's involved with finances, Senate and executive board. I did my best trying to keep everyone in the loop with this. Thank you for understanding my situation.
Right, thank you, Kurt. Yeah, I don't want to keep interrupting everybody with your hands, but I want to clarify something that, yes, the president is empowered to appoint directors or cabinets, but there are certain positions in the bylaws which go forward. If they contradict the Constitution, that would be a problem, but the bylaws do require the president to appoint certain cabinet members. This requires the vice president to appoint certain cabinet members. So currently those members are CASE, DEI, Community Services Coalition. So those just because there's an elected position and a cabinet position that appear to do the same thing, the Constitution wouldn't cancel out the other one, so I can keep explaining that.
So my thing from Brian and also Curtis as well, I think effectively, if this is to pass, like this body to pass the student body, I think the most effective way is to get rid of those DEI positions underneath the president's purview in her cabinet, or second his cabinet looking in future years. And then because we have this new executive, then have those like different directors come underneath also. We basically essentially like the new director of diversity and equity would just have their own appointed directors underneath their kind of cabinet so that it doesn't look like there's a contradiction, because at the end of the day, like that new DEIE would be someone that would be doing it based off of student government, so that has to be thing to be like, so it still would be advocacy for student government, so it just wouldn't be under like reporting to the president, like all of this executives still report to Angela, because at the end of the day, like it is a space that students see that represents student government. So yeah.
All right, thank you, Bobby.
So unfortunately, I'm going to have to urge the Senate for reasons that we haven't really talked about a lot so far, that, be skeptical of this, and, I would want you guys to go to lean against it. Because in addition to creating this new position, which, is a discussion on its own terms, this amendment doesn't just create this position, it completely rewrites the Constitution as it concerns the executive board. And it mirrors, like what I'm saying, mirrors a lot what I said about the next referendum, about the legislative branch and CRP, where there's a bunch of little changes that no one knows about realistically. No one has read, no one has really thought out what they do, whether that's a good idea. And we don't have the capacity right now, I think, to go through and like first identify all of them and think about what these changes would do and then evaluate whether that's a good idea. It's especially evident in the one about the legislative branch next, but this one too, I think it applies to both of them. That proper forethought was not applied in the consideration of writing this and presenting it to the Senate. And the reason I think that is because in the process of, the old version of this and the new version of this and the version of these referenda that has to do with the legislative branch, there have been several points where someone has brought up to Curtis something saying, this is a change, and this change would have this unintended consequence. And Curtis is like, oh, oops, let's change that. And sometimes in saying, oh, oops, let's change that, he changes it to something else that would have its own independent unintended consequence. So all of these problems, these tiny little things that are, will trip you up if you don't look at them hard enough. They're all over the place in this, and that's really a problem because we don't want to put forward something in the Constitution without having really read it and then realize afterward, oh, oops, this tangles up something that we intended to do, and we didn't mean to do this change. And then, so yeah, that's all these little things that are dispersed through these two referenda that I think should make you guys vote them down. And then you have to weigh that against the value of the big change that this does, which is of course establish this mid-executive position. And I don't have a huge opinion about whether this should be an executive position, except the fact that I would say, just in my own estimation, that this is probably a majority of what recent presidents have done, has been work on diversity and inclusion. So in establishing an independent position for it, I feel like you're diminishing the role of the president. Like this is a huge part of what the president does. And if the president is like the central point of all advocacy on the executive side, I don't think we should be taking the biggest advocacy part away from the president. The campaigns for president will still probably focus on this, and the president will still have opinions about this. And I think this removing it might just tangle things up. And since there's those problems, I definitely don't think that the benefits outweigh the harms of all these tiny little unintended consequences all over the place in this and the legislative referendum.
All right. Any other points, Jeremy?
In general, I think it would be a good thing for this to be an executive position. I'm not sure how they would vote. Would they vote for the person that may not necessarily fit DEI the way they automatically first think of it? And select someone who they know that they're doing exercising a club versus someone who like does a lot of policy work and things like that. And I think that's one reason why having it under the president's cabinet works better in a sense, because then when the president nominates someone, we can sit here and kind of go, well, does this person actually know the details of what their job will be, what kind of plans they have, and things of that nature, versus it just going off of really, do I think that you fit DEI the way I do it in my life?
Any other points, Ryan?
Yeah, I would say too, like, you know, the way the DEI position is structured now, like, under the, like, this cabinet, I mean, like, would have the same, there are no limitations there. They have the same amount of powers and responsibilities to DEI on this campus as does this new position do, right? So it kind of just redundant. And to be honest, like, while obviously I love democracy voting, I do think that it would be important to have elected leaders who have the time to really question who people's, you know, morals or their aptitudes, you know, their skills in this position, as you all did last spring. You know, I think you don't get that opportunity elsewhere. I think there'll be a debate, there always is, but you never get that chance to really sit down, hear them talk, and actually have a limited amount of time to question them on a position just as important as this.
Thank you. Any other points of discussion? Adam?
Motion to move to voting procedure.
So to close debate and move to vote.
Yes.
Okay, is there a second on that? All right, seeing no second, the motion goes. Bobby? Okay, we're still in discussion. Any other points of discussion? Bobby?
No one has anything else to say. I'm just going to give examples of some of these little things that no one has looked at, and if you overlook them, it's going to cause unintended consequences. And this is just from my casual perusal of this, so I'm sure that there's more, and that's the problem. So these tiny little things are like, for one, under the current system, if there's a vacancy for president and vice president, there is a special election, and if there's a vacancy for comptroller or secretary, the new person is appointed. This amendment changes that and has a special election for everyone. I think that's a bad idea because the comptroller and the secretary aren't really to the same degree as the vice president and president representing the interests of the student body and like their wishes. Rather, they're doing like administrative internal things that require not so much representation of political will, but more familiarity with the process. So I think that change to a special election is a bad idea, and no one probably knew about that. I also think, you know, it's not necessarily a bad idea or a good idea, but it's something that hasn't been thought through, that this amendment moves away from the current system where the interim president before the special election for a new president is filled by the comptroller. This changes it to the vice president. Now that strikes me as just nothing more than an allusion to the federal government, where it does make sense to have the vice president fill in for the president. But under our system, we're not the federal government. I don't think, you know, if I were Yuan having to do all the programming and then for a month, surprise, you have to do all the advocacy. At that point, you're responsible for administering the entire outward-facing portion of student government. There's a reason why we don't have the president fill in for the president, rather leave it to someone who does administrative stuff just to hold the fort while there's a special election going on. And also, again, just like in the other one, in the legislative referendum, for some reason, Curtis has added in that new vote threshold for confirming officials to 2/3 rather than a majority. So there's all these little changes that I don't see the reason behind and would have unintended consequences. And it's because none of us really know about them that we have, like, this is a big change. This is rewriting this, and the other one is rewriting the majority of the Constitution. And there has not been due diligence in this. These are not ready for prime time. We should not put them before the student body.
Sarah?
Yeah, the one thing I want to note is this will be up for a February referenda, so you have a little bit of time to discuss this, but at the same time, with the creation of a new position, it would mean that the entire Elections Commission would have to organize a special election for February to put this referenda up to the student body, so it's better to get that marketing as soon as possible so that we can make sure we have a decent voters turnout, to make sure the student body is actually represented and that we're showing what they want. And on top of that, then immediately after the February referenda, if it does pass and it's certified, we have to make sure that we get this 30-day election in cycle. So just consider that it would be the Elections Commission putting in all this work, and that we need to be able to make sure we have this plan so we can feasibly execute both the election for the referenda, and on top of that, the potential new position.
Yeah, just to go off of that, what the spring would look like if this were passed today is a referendum or a referendum election to ratify this. If it's ratified, an election 30 days later to elect the director of DEI on top of the elections commissioner and the elections commission putting together the regular spring election. So we would have 3 elections in the spring. That's just what would happen if this passed today and the referendum is ratified. It's those steps of 3 elections.
I just want to make sure I have this correct. So first, the first vote would be on that.
Mhm.
The second vote would be on this, the D.
Yeah.
The DEI position.
Yeah, if the referendum is
I'm-
let's just call it DEI.
Okay, on the
If
DEI.
it's ratified, there would be a special election of DEI.
And then the next election would be for the normal spring
Yes.
election, which would essentially be electing another one of us.
Yeah, so it would be the special election for the DEI. Well, no, it would be the referendum. If the referendum passes, then it would be the DEI. Then it would be the normal spring election of the execs. And on top of that, if there's any other referenda that need to be added, as well as the new DEI position if it gets passed.
So there'd be 2 elections for the DEI director, probably in
Probably
the
within a month of each other.
Probably in a month of each other. All right, Jeremy.
Before I think the other portion of this, how do the voters feel about votes? I know how Bobby feels about it.
I would like to reiterate, like, made by Bobby, that I think the Constitution is supposed to be vague. That way we have a lot of room to adjust for each position. I think the bylaws can be more specific. I agree with Bobby that by amending the Constitution, I think we're boxing ourselves in, especially by enumerating each of the duties of the candidate.
Any other points of discussion? All right, seeing no others, we'll move straight to vote on the entirety of the referendum. All those in favor of approving referendum 1819-006, as it is currently written, say yay. All opposed, say nay. All right, the nays have it, the referendum fails. All right, now moving to old business, to the consideration of referendum 1819-005. We'll move straight into discussion since the sponsor's not here.
I'll find it eventually.
All right, so discussion on the referendum. That's the referendum to reform the legislative branch. Jeremy?
So we have some CRP and like, my understanding of how that one is that we really didn't necessarily like agree with it. And do anything about tabling yet, so we were told that wasn't an option. So like, there are like amendments that want to be made or something like that, I guess we haven't looked at it, but like CRP definitely wanted to be on this.
All right, Katie?
So this is the one about the student government.
No.
This is to reform the Senate.
That was what we, yeah.
Max?
Yeah, so, what Jeremy said, your review didn't like this. We also didn't like the idea of amending it because there's some issues with it. And that was just a long time. If anything, the better thing, if you actually did want to reform legislative branch and stuff, have you rewrite the bill and, talk to other members of the Senate before you introduce it to the body. So in that case, CRP really did not want this to be referred on because it's a referendum.
Brian?
Sarah, can you scroll down to the
Yep.
next page? The thing about, did they delete the thing about the special election for? No, they didn't. Okay, for campus at large. So, yeah, so all the campus at large seats were filled in the election, correct? Okay, so if this were to be put on the ballot in February, and let's say there is a campus at large seat open, which is not an unreasonable reality, then we would be faced with a similar scenario as the last one, but a little more constricted, that if there is any campus at large seat open, because under section 7, it says that a special election fills campus at large seats. If this were ratified and a campus at large seat opened up, the elections commission would be required within 21 days to put together an election for a campus at large seat, again, on top of the spring election, but that is a reality that happens with any of the senator at large seats. If a senator at large, this is, in my opinion, probably the biggest change. It's not huge, but yeah, the elections commission would have 21 days to put together a campus at large election every time a campus at large senator runs.
All right, any other points of discussion? Bobby?
Yeah, so just really quickly repeating what I said last time, that there are problems with this and they're tiny and they're everywhere and it's too much to go through it. And also something in general, like everyone keeps saying that CRP didn't want to do this, which is true. And the reason why it came to the full Senate anyway is because there was a parliamentary decision that referring this referendum to CRP, even though it happened in the same manner as bills are always referred to CRP, is like necessitated it to come back to Senate because basically what I'm saying is that there was some unclarity in how this was referred to CRP that resulted in some.
All right, out of order, points need to be directed to the referendum itself. All right, any other points of discussion?
Katie wanted me to do a program.
Okay, that's perfect. Okay. Yeah, you're good. Okay, any other points relevant to the referendum? All right, seeing no other points, we'll move straight to vote on the referendum as a whole. All right, all those in favor of approving referendum 1819-005 as it is currently written, say yay. All right, all opposed say nay. Nay. All right, the nays have it. And the referendum has been defeated. Seeing no further old business, we'll move to public comment. Any members of the public wishing to speak at this time?
Well, technically,
Yeah.
I'd like to do one. I don't have my own section, but I just wanted to say, as the interim chair, I cannot even hope to eclipse what Brian has done in the last year. He has just been wonderful and really needs something of this position. I am just a caretaker. I look forward to working with Sean and Angela to expedite as quickly as possible a permanent successor, because I do not want to be here. Also, I will just encourage all of you to listen to the notice that Brian put out last week about whistleblowers, about intimidation, about taking all your inquiries seriously and moving forward with them rather than submitting and then retracting. It's been a very difficult semester for Judicial Board in terms of the workload. Please remember, we're not paid. And we didn't sign up for the commitment that some other folks in AUSG signed up for. Like, please come to us with all of your inquiries, but be serious about them. This job should not be this difficult, but it has become very difficult. So I look forward to working with all of you, and I hope to have a successor confirmed within the next couple months.
Thank you. Any other public? Okay, seeing no other public. Any executives for the good of the order? Bobby?
Yeah, so I'm going to return now that I will be allowed to my important discussion about parliamentary procedure, which I do think was relevant to that referendum because that is the parliamentary procedure through which that referendum went. And I think that the fact that it was ruled out of order is another thing in this theme of what I was talking about, that the reason we have rules is to facilitate our work, not to arbitrarily restrict us from doing it. To shut down the debate of the Senate. That applies both in ruling things out of order when they're not, ambiguously out of order. Like if it could be relevant to this discussion, I think the more discussion, the better. So I would urge anyone who fills the role of Speaker in the 15th Senate to please allow as much discussion as possible. And then, like on parliamentary procedure in general, we have parliamentary procedure so that we can, make sure that whatever the Senate wants to do, it does effectively. We should not just be arbitrarily saying, because the Senate didn't know specifically what it wanted to do, that I am going to say, as a matter of parliamentary procedure, I will not allow the Senate to do anything except as one thing, which is what happened on this referendum. I think if the Senate wants to vote something down in committee, that's important, and that's how it always has been done. That's one of the reasons why things go to committee, is to go through that first screening or not. So the way that the Senate can do something about this is to look at its own parliamentary procedure and kind of, define more clearly what committee referral means, because that ambiguity is what gave rise to the frustrating situation today where CRP's hands are tied and that the debate was had its own hands tied in the floor of the full Senate.
All right, any other executives move on?
So I kind of just want to touch on Brian's leaving at the end of this me and Brian had a conversation the other day walking onto the quad, and he was going to go back to the bus, and I was going to go back to my room. And we were reminiscing on when we first joined student government, and we remembered how we joined student government both our freshman fall semester. He was communication director at the time under Chris Schneider, and I was a newly elected undergraduate senator. And to see us have gone through the ranks of student government to where we are these past 2 years, I think is like very unprecedented because everyone's had different journeys getting to these roles in student government. So I just wanted to highlight the amazing work that he's done in judicial board as well as reforming a lot of what the structure of it is. I remember the judicial board used to be very much seen as this, and Ryan could probably attest to this when he was in the Senate, it's very much like crazy, kind of like, Supreme Court wannabe board that, would just do random things, and just hold people randomly accountable for things that just did not make any sense. So I think Brian has really brought validity to what the organization is, and also like a trust that it is holding people accountable for the things that they might be doing wrong, and not because we want to, a gotcha, try to get you in trouble, but just to let you know that like we are more than just, what our elected positions are. We are representing 8,000 students, undergraduate students at Undergraduate American University. So I just want all of us to really appreciate what Brian has done. And although he won't be officially a title student government, I know that he will still have the support of this. He always has, since he's been in student government since freshman year, wanted the organization to be better than what it is and better than what he's made it, what his legacy has done. So I think it's very important to remember, like, his legacy is still going to live on here. And I just want to appreciate from the bottom of my heart, thank you for everything that he's done for me in student government, and then also for the betterment of everyone that's student right now.
Thank you so much. Any other?
Yeah, Brian, love you.
Can't really, no, I'm gonna try. So I wasn't here to report, but just to give you guys updates. We're gonna have our AUSG launch banquet this week, coming up this Friday. It's gonna be in the tavern, starting at 6:30. I will send you all an email about that, and you will also AUSG marketing for that. It's gonna be fun. Come out, you're gonna see kind of get some updates from the executives, get some updates from other student leaders on campus, hear about our whole rebranding of this organization. So definitely come out to that. We'll be sending out more information about that soon. Second thing is I want to, who in here is going to be the next Senate? Cool. Okay. For all of you here today, I want to challenge you to not, something that was told to me when I was Senator, even afterwards. When I first heard the advice, I hate that also. But I'm challenging you all not to look at the internal, don't get too caught up in the internal aspects of this organization. You focus too much on your time trying to change the nitty-gritty bureaucracy of everything, thinking that it's going to get better. You're using all your time on that rather than spending it on the external work happening in the student body. So many reasons why people look at this at the Senate, at student government in general, as just like, they don't do anything, is because honestly, we spend most of our time debating with each other, looking at the internal aspects of this organization, rather than trying to go outside, get this organization, and see what we can do there. I get it, it is tough work. Like one of the most pivotal things I did as a senator, and it's extended from being in Senate to case, was allowing ROTC students party registration. That was external work. It's probably one of the biggest external jobs and projects that I worked on. And again, it takes a lot of time, but still do it. I myself, when I was Senator, got caught up on just the internal aspects of it. I was the sponsor of the bill that changed SAC to case, and I was like, ooh, good for me, cool. No, it wasn't anything. I wasn't helping any student member. I was just doing something that was internal. I challenge you all to do that. I'm here. I'm going to be here till May. I'm here for the winter break. If you need help, if you have questions, things like that, come to me. I'm here to help you in any capacity that I possibly can. With that, keep doing the good work that you're doing, and I look forward to seeing you all very soon.
Thank you. Any other executives for the good of the order? Bobby?
Yeah, I forgot one thing, and also, it's a good contrast to Brian because it is an internal matter. But like I said last time, and I will keep saying until the second meeting of the 15th Senate, just making myself available if you are interested in running for chair of the Finance Committee in the 15th Senate. I was chair of the Finance Committee 2 terms, and I'm the comptroller, so I would just like to let you all know, answer any questions you have about the position, because it's important. Deals with a lot of important, impactful stuff. And also, it's not as important, but even if you're just interested in running for one of the non-chair positions on the finance committee, you can feel free to reach out to me as well. So that's my regular notice of that.
Also to add on to that, just a quick thing, I also served as vice chair of finance committee, so it's also a fun job to be vice chair, so if you don't win, your chair election, vice chair is also great.
Also, to add on to that.
All right, any other executives? Or seeing no other executives, any senators from the order? Max?
So I can't make the next meeting, so ending my Senate career will be, I think, easy story today. Yeah, so even though my bill with Parker was your technical record, this is the brainchild partly last year, right around the state era, if you will. Very unfortunate that GW is not ending the state right now. But such a, so I want to thank you guys again. I said something like this at your Senate, and then I extended my trust. So here I am. So yeah, thank you guys. This has been a lot of fun. I'm not constantly with the reiteration, but what Ryan said. I really took that apart when I first ran for Senate, not having the nitty-gritty part when I got it. We started having a conversation last year before it became a big deal, and I think that we really progressed that issue before every student cared about it and brought a lot of attention to it early on. Yeah, as I think the only person in this room who's a senator who's not returning to the Senate, I really strongly encourage you to look at Brian's work. Don't tackle this nitty-gritty. It doesn't really affect anyone. Also, yeah. Retweet from the one, go Brian. Take down the guys. Take down the guys. All right, that's it. I'm done. Andrew sent me.
Any other senators? The order?
So just I guess kind of going off of what Ryan and Yolanda are saying, Senator Roy and I went to a roundtable a couple weeks ago in regards to mental health, and after hearing the conversations that were had, we decided to kind of author a report that we're looking at to look at something that Georgetown did in regards to making something for those who are low-income students in order to go to other types of counseling sessions. So we're looking at just doing a report to see how we can do something like that. Talk to our body about that. Any other senators who'd like to help us in that endeavor, we definitely would appreciate it.
Thank you. Any other senators for the order? All right, seeing no other senators. Yes, Brian, on top of everything else I was said. Thank you so much.
I'm not the speaker, but I'm on my way out. Yeah, this, like Mulan said, I've been here for 2.5 years in AUSG, and I have enjoyed almost every minute of it. In my resignation letter, I did say I don't know what the hell Mulan was talking about, my legacy. I don't know what that's all about, but I did say in my letter that I don't want my leaving to be about me. When I first came to AUSG, I very much championed and talked about mental health on campus, and I think it's important. And I stressed in my letter that we are student leaders, so there are times we have to sacrifice parts of ourselves for other people, time, attention, things like that. But don't let it come to the sacrifice of your health, mentally, physically, emotionally, things like that. You were not put in these positions for that. I can speak. I definitely sacrificed too much of myself for this job, and I would not encourage you all to do that. I would encourage you all to look out for yourselves and look out for each other while you're doing this, because this can be a stressful job to be in. Yeah, and kind of like what I said earlier, you guys are always welcome to message me, talk to me about anything. I've made a lot of great friendships here in AUSG, and I look forward to extending those outside of AUSG. So, yeah. What's that?
Library loans.
With that, if you come to me asking me to get rid of your library loans, I will add library fines to your account. What's that movie? How's the end like? Good night and good luck. Is that the movie? Good night and good luck that you quit smoking. Uncultured.
Brian, you had a great legacy.
Uncultured
Down the
swine.
toilet.
Behind that, Jacob's not here, he is a, media movie person. He probably knows that.
Exactly, yes. Well, it's a great movie, go look at it. Good night and good luck. But good night and good luck to all of you as you go forward with this organization.
All right, Sarah?
Yeah, I just have my couple reminders of check your emails because I always send those out. Doodle polls will come. On top of that, I'm trying to work on marketing efforts. So if any of you have any ideas, please contribute because I can only work my marketing brain so far. See if you need help with anything, as always. Like Ryan wants to offer himself up as chief of staff. I am the chief of staff of the Senate specifically, so I can target myself specifically to all of you guys. I can target myself as impartially to you guys as possible because, elections policy board, too many hats at once. But yeah, anything you need on any fronts, I'm always available. I could pull the Mulan and put that PowerPoint of all my social media. I'm accessible at any point in time.
All right, thank you all for a great and productive meeting. Have a great week. We are.
I am partial. I'm partial now.